Work, work, work. Get up at 4:30 a.m. every day. Stream for 30 or so people every day. Keep pushing, keep improving. Then one day, a year later, boom, 50,000 viewers. Lesson here is keep going. Don't quit. Believe in yourself. It takes time. Austin Peterson, libertarian podcaster, karate sensei, and father. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. For tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Holy wow. I made it. 500. I can quit now. I can quit after this episode. Just kidding. I'm not going to quit. I'm just getting started. I'm having fun with this. This whole podcasting thing is a lot more fun than I thought it would be. Now I'm not going to lie, it is a bit of a challenge in many ways. There have been ups and there have been downs, and I've just kind of kept going. There've been I've taken whole weeks off, and not like oh, it's Christmas time and I've got to take the week off. I'm going to spend time with my family. No, I've literally taken whole weeks off because for whatever reason something happened, right? And so like, but here I am, 500 episodes in. All right, so here's what's going to happen today. Number one, first, I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about. I talked about it yesterday briefly. Well, maybe not briefly. I talked about it kind of at length. I talked about the backlash against a woman saying a slur against a little child. Then I kind of connected that to some of the other stories because they all had like Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe set up. And so I talked a little bit about that and I gave you my perspective. And then I happened to see that Matt Walsh came out with a perspective. So I'm going to talk about that. We're going to do that first. And then after that, we're gonna have our intermission, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna kind of give you some reflections on 500 episodes in, kind of like what my motivation is, what you can expect if you're like relatively new, because I've got some new people following, new people watching the show, and if you're kind of like, what is this Liberty Dad dude all about? Why doesn't he just call it the DL Cummings show? Like everybody else, the Matt Walsh show or whatever. Why doesn't he do that? What's he about? What's going on? How come he doesn't talk more about parenting? Yada yada. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about motivation, some of my influences in the second half of this show, and then that's where like throw out questions. Try not to throw out too many. Like if there's a lot of chatter in the in the comment section, like maybe withhold some of your questions till the second half so I don't miss them. Okay, because if you put it in right away, and then there's a whole bunch of conversation, I may miss it by accident just because it's kind of hard to click all the buttons that you're supposed to click, keep your thoughts in line, and look at different chats to see what I need to be talking or what I need to be responding to. So do me that. Then once we're done with all of that, then I'm going to go into premium mode. I'm gonna kind of, and that one's today is gonna be kind of experimental because I've never been in premium mode, much less switched from regular mode to premium mode. So we're gonna give that a shot and see what happens. And in premium mode, it's experimental. So what that'll do, that'll give me an opportunity to kind of figure things out and fumble around a little bit. But I will kind of give you some insight into some of my favorite episodes that I've done. Just further conversation about me, and I'm taking it easy on that one. I know it's not like super juicy. Like, man, I can't wait to get in Rumble Premium mode to hear about his favorite podcast episodes that he did. So it may not be too exciting, but I figured that would give you something just to kind of kick off the idea of premium mode, right? Like, I don't want to do something super duper juicy and then be fumbling around with controls or something like that. So if it all gets messed up, then all I talked about was my favorite episodes. And if it all goes well, then great. I talked about my favorite episodes. You got a little bit more insight into me, and then we can move forward with, hopefully some more interesting stuff. So that's my plan for the day. All right. So let's get into this because the video that I'm going to show you is about 7 minutes long. Um, this is from Matt Walsh's show, and he talks about this Shiloh Hendrix issue thing, and he's talking about like, hey, this is the end of cancel culture. And I thought it was a very interesting point, and I actually agree with him. So we're gonna watch this so that we can see what it is that DL agrees with Matt. So when it comes to Matt Walsh, I feel like him and I agree about 50% of the time, roughly. And then the other 50%, obviously, we disagree for one reason or another. And it's kind of funny because Anthony Carmelo, back in episode 482, where I talked about fatherlessness, I think like that's the one where I actually disagreed with Matt Walsh, and I had some issues with the take that he had regarding Anthony Carmelo. And I actually agree with him on this one. And I know people might look at it and go, oh, okay. So you agree with him on the white woman and disagree with him. Like, okay, well, you have to watch the shows so that you understand the context. Because if you're trying to bring any race bait stuff in here, I'm gonna kick it right on out and be like, poof. So you're gonna like, do I have anything that would I have no buttons at all that would kind of sound like a kick. But if I had one, that's what it'd be like, that's not really a good kick. Poof. How about that? That's kind of like a kick. So anyway, let's watch this video and let's see what we've got. In the meantime, I do want to point out um, my VA lady, a great help to the show, says join Rumble Premium by clicking the red button here on Rumble. So if you're on Rumble and you want to join with me in the after show, right? Like the premium, then do that. Go hit that red button, join. If not, no big deal. It's cool. I appreciate everybody that watches this show, whether you're a premium member or not. You watching, whether you're a premium member, whether you have signed up with an account, whether you're just casually watching, all of it goes toward the success of this show. So thank you so much. And I get it. Everybody's in a different place. Do what you can to help out the show. If nothing else, at the very least, watch my show so I get the watch hours and then promote the show and just let others know and say, hey, you got to check out this Liberty Dad guy. He's really great, and you can use all the adjectives that you want that describe me in a very positive manner. You can beef me up, whatever. I don't know if I'll meet your expectations, but feel free to do that. So anyway, let's watch this video here and then I'll chime in. It's a relative, again, it's 7 minutes. So, but I have the reason that, and I'll explain more about like the length of the clips and stuff like that. But in the second half of the show, but it's 7 minutes because I've got to capture the full context of his words, and I think this 7 minutes does. So let's go ahead.
This story is following the script that we all know by heart. A random person is caught on camera doing something rude or offensive. The video is posted by some third party, usually somebody who wasn't even involved in the incident. And then thousands of sociopaths set out to destroy the person's life and possibly get them killed, all for sport as a form of like sadistic entertainment.
Okay. I agree. Like there is this element on the internet. The internet is simultaneously a cursing and a blessing, right? A curse and a blessing. And it's because like lots of great things happen. You meet cool people, you learn interesting stuff, right? Like I can go online onto YouTube and I can just type in anything. Like if I'm trying to figure out how to, drywall, I'm like, hey, how do I patch this hole in the wall? Let's say I don't know how to do that, which I do. But let's say I didn't. I could go on there and I could just find information and I could be like, how do I do this? When I was at my wedding in 2015 in Indonesia, I had purchased a suit with a bow tie, and I did not know how to tie a bow tie. And that was the first time that I ever wore a bow tie. And my wife's family was really entertained by the fact that I literally pulled up the Art of Manliness video on tying a bow tie, right? And tied a bow tie and it looked really good. And they were just amused. They were like, dude, my wife was like, she was like, hey, he's never done that before. I mean, she said it obviously in Indonesian. She's like, he's never done that before. This is the first time. And they're like, wow, he's just learning from a video. Yes. That's the greatness of the internet, things like that. The negative part in what he's going to get into here in a moment is the cancel culture, the fact that online mobs can really devastate somebody. And you might remember, if I don't remember which episode it was, but if several episodes back, several like meaning like 10 or 15 or something like that, or maybe even more, I criticized people for canceling the Home Depot lady. Remember the Home Depot lady? She was on her Facebook page and she was talking about the president's assassination. She was like, oh, it's too bad the assassin missed. Right. And somebody got wind of it and they spread that all over. And some dude showed up at her work with his camera in hand. And he was like, and he said it on the film. He's like, I'm going to make you famous. And he's like, are you so and so? Are you this person? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yes. And he's like, oh, you think it's cool to talk about Trump like that? And she's like, sir, I'm at work. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to make you famous. I'm a veteran. And then I criticize him because I'm like, I'm a veteran too. And I served not so that I could wave that in somebody's face, you jackass. Sorry, it's supposed to be a family friendly show. So, but like it bothered me, right? And then what did he do? He put that on the internet. Libs of TikTok got a hold of it, and then everybody just blew it up, and she got fired from her job. Congratulations, everybody! You fired the Home Depot lady. Woohoo! You stopped bigotry against your president. No, you didn't, because I have plenty of criticism for him. Go ahead and try to cancel me. You show up at my work, which is my house. We're not going to make threats. Let's continue.
Nobody stops to think about the consequences. There's no consideration of proportionality.
Who said proportionality yesterday? I did. Me. I talked about it and I said, what did I say? I was like, the reason I said, yes, what she said was despicable. And we don't have to worry about quibbling with the details. Was the kid black? Was he kind of black? Was he actually 5? Was he really autistic? It doesn't matter. He was a kid. If he was somewhere within the vicinity of being 5, right? Like, it is not appropriate to yell slurs at a little kid, even if they're stealing from you. Okay. So, like, all the details would just make it worse, but we don't have to worry about the details. And he's right. Like, people can get online and they can do all these things. They can call her phone, they can call her work, they can insult her, blah blah blah. They can do all that, and there's no consequence for it. That's a problem. That's cancel culture, and it needs to be dealt with. So and this is where he's going to talk about like what the antidote to that is.
Saying the N-word to a child in a moment of anger is bad. Is it so bad that it warrants the total and permanent destruction of a person's life? Is it so bad that they deserve to have their physical safety and the safety of their family put in jeopardy?
Okay. I didn't add this part, but the full, and I've linked to his show. You can go watch it. It's like a 20-minute segment altogether. He actually pulls up videos of people talking about she should suffer violence. Okay. So like that, like when we're talking about like people suggesting harm to the woman over her saying the N-word, he's not joking. People literally have been on the internet saying she should suffer harm, her baby should suffer harm. Like, that's crazy. That is insane. Yes, she was a terrible person for calling a child the N-word. And some of you people took it so much further that she's actually, in a sense, comparatively speaking to you, the good guy. Like, and it's weird to say, but it's true.
Is it so bad that they deserve to have their child assaulted? Is it that kind of bad?
No.
Now, to the social media mob, the answer is always yes. It's always yes, that is, provided that the offending stranger fits certain parameters. And the most important parameter is that the person, the offender, is white.
Okay. That's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to say, right? Because people want to, people like me that have been, that are my age, were raised not really to not see color. Like, I know we say that, and what we really are trying to say when people make that comment, what they're really trying to say is, I do not put that at the forefront of my thinking, like, "Oh, they're black this." I treat everybody equal. Now, nobody really treats everybody equal. We like to believe that, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, most people try not to lead with race as their deciding factor on how to understand a situation or how to respond. And but what he's getting at is that when it becomes the mob online, one of their favorite targets is a white person. Like, if you look, white people disproportionately get the mob, and that's just true. It's a fact. Now, why is it true? Well, I wish I had a copy of this, and I'll if I can find it, maybe I'll search for it later today. But there was like I think it was from 4chan or one of those type of sites. But somebody was responding to why video game characters were frequently white males, and they made a very interesting point. They said, and I don't know if it's actually true, but it was a very interesting point. At least they said what the reason that video game characters typically are white is because they can be any character and nobody cares. They could be the good guy, nobody and people are cool with that. They could be the most horrible evil villain in the story and nobody gets angry, right? Like they can like the white males can be whatever in a story. And so I thought that was kind of interesting and like he's correct. I don't know if it's a negative, I don't know if that necessarily reflects a negative view of white people per se, and maybe that's his angle. But it is true, white people can be the most easy target because nobody really gets angry about it. Like maybe some white people do, but like on net balance, if you have somebody who's a black person and they are a villain or they're perceived to be a villain, there is a lot more outrage disproportionate to when there's a white person and when they're perceived to be the villain. So he's correct objectively. Why? That's for another day. Oops. Where's my? There we go.
And we all know how this script ends. The offender, in a desperate attempt to call off the dogs, tearfully apologizes and begs for mercy, a mercy that they surely will not receive.
This was an interesting point that he made. When I was growing up, my mother would watch daytime talk shows. She didn't watch soap operas much, but she watched the talk shows and she loved Oprah. And one of the most interesting things I observed, and this has stuck with me and influenced me, just in ways that I think about the world, is that when there would be a parent on there, it was usually a mother, almost always a mother, maybe always. But I'm going to leave it at almost always. We want to be careful with absolutes. So almost always there would be a mother on this show, and she would have like this out of control child, and usually there was like multiple mothers. And so what you would observe is if the mother got up there and was like, "Yes, my child's out of control. I think I'm a good mother. I try really hard." If she kind of defended herself, the mob in the crowd, that is, would boo her. They would be like, "No, you're a terrible mom, blah, blah." Like, it was like, "No, you can't say that because you have an out of control child. So your out of control child means you're bad. End of story. Do not defend yourself." However, if there was a mother on there and she started sobbing and she was like, "I'm a terrible mother. I wish I could be better." And she just was basically throwing herself at the mercy of the mob would be like, "Oh, no, you're not a bad mom." And it's like, "Well, wait a minute. She's literally got the same problem as this other mom who you just excoriated, and and she's not the bad mom." And so their response as a mob was not really an objective evaluation of the situation. It was, "Are you defenestrating yourself in front of us?" Right? And now today's mob is different. They don't today you don't give in to the mob. If you give in to the mob, It's a power play today. So that's what he's talking about. But it's just interesting. It made me think of that. Like back in the day, the mob used to be a little different. The mob actually used to have sympathy. And I think the big difference is that in that case, the mob was there in person. Whereas today's mob is online. They don't have to look at the person they're taking on eyeball to eyeball. Right. And so I think, even though they were wrong in how they perceived maybe the two different moms, there was still at least that element of sympathy that was available for them to call upon. Today's mob doesn't have that. And so I think he's bringing in a very relevant point. So let's continue.
But that is where the M. Night Shyamalan twist ending comes into play. Because Shiloh Hendrix did not apologize. Instead, she posted a crowdfunding campaign on Give, Send, Go, where she doubled down and defended her actions and asked for help to relocate and get her family to safety.
Okay, he's right. That's what happened. And on this show, we like to talk about things objectively. What happened? She said a very nasty thing to a child. Okay, so if let's walk through this. A child allegedly was going through her stuff to steal something, presumably. We don't have any video of it, but we're going to presume that. Then she says an evil, awful thing to this child. That should be condemned. Then what happens is a man starts videotaping her. And it's interesting, in the video, I saw some more clips of it. In the video, he tells her, I'm gonna put this on the internet. Let's see what the internet has to say. Which is interesting because I just mentioned the Home Depot lady a few moments ago. That's almost exactly what that supposed veteran said when he showed up at her work. He said, we're going to put this on the internet. I'm going to make you famous, right? Basically what he's saying is, I am going to hang you out to dry. I'm going to hand you over to the mob. Okay. Now, I'm going to be very careful with my next words here because I know it's going to be easily misconstrued. There was another person in history who was handed over to the mob. His name was Jesus. Now, I'm not telling you that Shiloh is Jesus. Far from it. Jesus welcomed little children, scolded people that tried to shoo them away. He treated people with respect at all times. Okay? However, I'm making that point to kind of tell you, like, a mob is a mob. And as a rule of thumb, the mob is probably wrong because there is nothing to curtail the mob's actions. The mob is a free for all, whether it's Jesus, a clearly good person, like in every sense of the word, and even when it comes to somebody who's acting terrible, like Shiloh, and she was. There's like, if people try to clip up my words to make it sound like I'm spinning her to look like Jesus, I'm not. You could almost say she's the opposite of Jesus. Jesus welcomed the little children regardless, and she was calling them the N-word. But the mob treated basically both of them the same. They tried to destroy both of them because that's what a mob does. So what is the answer? How do we fight against such a creature? Because, yeah, you might relish it when it's somebody that's bad. But again, the mob doesn't care. The mob could easily go after somebody that's good. And we have seen that in history, like not just history, but also even in recent years. Mobs go after people that they don't really need to go after. Right. Now, and usually the case is that person did something that we dislike. But again, we have to get into proportionality. Is the proportionality of what the mob did? And it's almost never proportional. In fact, I'm not even sure that I could think of a time when the mob that went after people, either online or in person, was proportional. So let's see what he has to say.
And then a double twist. A different group formed to counter the outrage mob. They started donating to her campaign, and she surpassed her original funding goal in less than a day. Within 3 days, she had earned over $500,000. Now she's somewhere north of $600,000. So the woman who was supposed to have her life ruined by the mob is instead on her way to potentially becoming a millionaire. Now, this twist, as you can imagine, has outraged the outrage mob even more, but a large number of prominent people on the right are also horrified by this turn of events. Just as one example, Colin Wright tweeted, "The woke right is now mirroring the woke left's tendency to glorify and martyr immoral degenerates solely based on shared racial identity. This woke one-upmanship is a race to the very bottom." Many conservative influencers and commentators, many of them who I like and respect, have echoed this sentiment. They say that the people donating to this woman are behaving no better than the left. They say that this is the right's version of the Carmelo Anthony fundraiser that also raised $500,000, even though he stabbed somebody to death, which I hope we can agree is far, far worse than saying a bad word. Some have even speculated that this whole thing is some kind of psyop meant to delegitimize the movement and make conservatives look racist. To that, I must assure them, despite how it may seem, that not everything is a psyop. There are things that really just happen in life. Some things do just happen, and I think this is one of them.
I agree. I hate the psyop thing because I'm pretty certain that, like, it's funny. We have this conversation about experts and evaluating evidence and all this stuff, and then nobody ever looks and says, "Okay, if you're claiming this is a psyop, how many times have you correctly called a psyop versus how many times have you incorrectly called a psyop?" Right? And I'm willing to bet. I have to guess on this. I have no evidence, but I'm willing to bet that the people that scream psyop the loudest are probably the ones that get it wrong the most often, or um, have the least amount of evidence to back up their claims. Like, they just say it so often that they're bound to get it right at some point. And so I think that's a really great point. Like, sometimes you can just look at it at face value and say, what do we have here? Okay, I think we have a person that lost their sensibilities, and they got angry and yelled at a kid. And look, again, there's no nobody's defending that. I don't think Matt Walsh is. I'm certainly not. But again, like I said yesterday, you have to compartmentalize this and say, all right, this is one action. This is a separate action. This is another action. And we have to, like, there's a whole picture here, but within that whole picture, there are parts, there are elements, and we have to address those elements individually at some point so that we can say, this was good, this was bad, this is good, whatever. Or maybe it's all bad, or maybe it's all good, whatever. That's how you objectively look at any situation. You say, what are the elements that I would agree with? What are the elements that make sense? What are the elements that I disagree with? What is the good? What is the bad? And there's usually a mix within any story. You read a story. It's like we watch a movie, right? And the good guy is the good guy, but then maybe he starts being the bad guy, and then he wakes up, he comes to his senses, right? And we can all say, like, he was the good guy here. Here he was not being the good guy. Then he came back to being the good guy, right? These elements exist in every story, not just fiction, but real life as well.
Now, I understand that some people on my side feel, to put it scientifically, icky about this whole thing. I understand why they feel icky. I understand why they don't want to condone saying racial slurs to children. I don't want to condone it either, and I don't. And nobody really does. But I think they're missing the point. I don't think they understand what's actually happening here or why. It is, in the end, a net positive that this woman has raised $500,000. I'm glad she has. I hope she raises $1 million.
Okay, this may be the only part where I actually kind of disagree, but kind of not. I don't actively hope that she raises $1 million. I just kind of don't care. Like, because I look at it and I say, you have the freedom of association. It's one of my pillars of libertarianism, is freedom of association. And that association means you can associate, like, I can bring over people to my house for any reason that I want. I could bring over only black people. I can bring over only white people. I can bring over everybody, right? Doesn't, for whatever reason I want. I can say, hey, I think you're cool because I like the style of clothes that you wear. Or I could say, hey, we have a shared interest. Why don't you come on? Like, whatever reason, freedom of association exists. And I think that it also exists Uh, when we are talking about what kind of things we support with our time, our money, our energy, our resources, right? So it's freedom of association to lend my neighbor a cup of sugar. It's also freedom of association to say, I will donate to this particular cause, right? Like so for me, I look at it very bare and simple. I go, even if everything about the story says she's a terrible person and deserves everything, people can still give her money if they choose. That is part of my worldview of freedom of association. However, I do agree that it's probably a good thing that this is happening. And let's hear his answer, and then we'll explain more from my perspective.
Will not be joining with some of my conservative friends in wagging my finger at her donors. And I'll explain why. First of all, she does have a legitimate need for the money. The mob is truly trying to get her killed. I don't believe that a woman should have her life threatened for saying a word, even a bad one. Now, you could say freedom of speech, but not freedom from consequences for your speech, all you want. But if losing your livelihood and having your house burned down is a consequence of your speech, then you do not have free speech. Supporting free speech means supporting someone's ability to speak without having their family murdered for it.
Okay. So, on one hand, I'm inclined to say hyperbole. On the other hand, not so much. So, she was doxxed, and people were making videos, like, and you can go see Matt Walsh's whole video where he actually plays a few videos where people were calling for violence against her. Um, so these were happening, and we've seen this kind of thing happen in the past. So you might remember Nick Fuentes. Not a fan of him. Okay, he's that Groyper leader dude, like white supremacist. I don't really know exactly where he fits in, but he's a weird character to say the least. And some woman showed up at his door with a phone, rang his doorbell, and was trying to basically, um, she was basically trying to catch him in a moment and get some juicy video. And she was asking about something that he believed in. And um, and I'm like, and then he like knocked her down or something like that, like pushed on her, knocked her down, and kicked her, and then spray maced her, sprayed a can of like bear spray or whatever. And everybody was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he did that." And I'm like, "Well, you did show up at his home and you tried, you know, like he doesn't know your intentions. You showed up. You're not like a reporter who can be identified specifically with a company, and the company might have to pay millions of dollars, right? And so therefore therefore the check and balance is monetary compensation, loss of reputation, right? Like, so if I'm a reporter and I work for, Acme News, and then I do something stupid, Acme, as part of my reporting, Acme News can be held liable for that. So Acme News will be like, DL, here are the standards, here are the things, here are the lines that you don't cross. If you do this, you'll be fired, blah, 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 all this, right? So they put into place all these things to protect themselves. Well, regular citizens don't necessarily do that. So if a regular citizen goes and does something to somebody, they may not be held accountable in the same way, or they might be held accountable, but only after the fact. And so, therefore, there's nothing that says, let's counterbalance that ahead of time. So I agree with him. Like, you have this mob, and it's unclear. You don't know exactly what harm may come her way. Maybe nobody will show up at her doorstep. Maybe somebody will. Maybe somebody shows up and says, I can't believe you did that. I've got an autistic son, and boy, I'm going to show you, I'm going to teach you a lesson. That kind of thing happens. Road rage happens. You're driving down the road, somebody's in a hurry, they cut you off, you get mad, you pull up, you give them the finger, right? And you honk your horn at them, you swerve at them, and then all of a sudden now you two are in a big fight, and then it could end up, and it has end up, in people getting hurt. So yes, people get out of control very quickly. So, yes, I would argue her life was legitimately in danger because of the mob, right? And this is completely separate to, hey, you're a terrible person by yelling at that child the way that you did. Let's continue.
Okay. I mean, that should be pretty obvious. Second, more importantly, and this is the part that I really need everyone to stop and think about. This is the most devastating attack on cancel culture that we have seen, possibly ever. Shiloh Hendrix has, without really trying, effectively ended cancel culture. As Mark Dice said in his video about the incident, Shiloh is the final boss of cancel culture, or maybe rather the final boss that cancel culture has to fight. And I think that's right. And this is the part that many conservatives seem to be missing. All they see is that this woman said something bad and is now getting rewarded for it. The whole thing is so unsavory that they can't help but recoil. And yeah, it is unsavory. You wish that Shiloh had said or done something that we could affirmatively defend. That would be much easier. Nobody wants to affirmatively defend cussing out a 5-year-old, even though I don't think the kid's actually 5. But none of that is the point. The point is that the only way to put an end to this routine, the routine where the outrage mob mobilizes and assembles to destroy somebody's life, is to disincentivize the routine. And the only way to disincentivize that behavior is to reward the person who's being targeted. Now, we can complain all we want about the mob tactics and how they silence and punish people and exact vengeance in wildly disproportionate ways. We can condemn it. We can write think pieces about it. We can deliver monologues. None of that matters. None of that will stop them. The only thing that can stop them, the only thing that will make them think twice about doing this again, is if they know that instead of getting their target canceled, they might accidentally make them rich. And more important, even than the money, they must know that their attempt to isolate and ostracize somebody will fail. That for every person condemning the targeted person, 2 more will rally to their defense.
All right. He's 100% correct. It's the check and balance on the mob. That's what this is. And he's correct. I mean, how long have we talked about mobs and what to do about them? And how long have they persisted and continued to do their thing? For a long time. And there comes a tipping point. And the reality is the tipping point is not necessary. You're not guaranteed to get that tipping point with the story that you can get behind. And that's why it takes being astute and paying attention and understanding what's going on in the world. We have to do more than just say, oh, she said a foul thing, and she did. Right? And should she be punished for that? Perhaps. Right? Perhaps. But should she be punished to this degree where now her life, her child's life is threatened? No, that is disproportionate. And that is exactly why people are getting behind her. Now, I disagree with some of the commentary about others that are getting behind her. Some of the people, like I've seen some people go, they call this fatigue. And the game they're playing is they're like, oh, Black people are so violent that white people are just fatigued with it all, and they're fatigued with the dual standards and this. And to some degree, there may be some accuracy there, not toward Black people per se, but more like the mob and what we've allowed to be open in the public square, right? Like what kind of attitudes have we allowed to bubble up that influence us as a society? Yes, in that case, some of those ideas we're tired of. We're tired of people saying, oh, white people are all bad. This is just nonsense. That's no excuse for her behavior toward a child. So the idea, because like some people were framing it like not so much that the fatigue is why people are donating, but a combination of why they're donating and why she said what she said. And I'm like, okay, fatigue may explain why people are supporting her And that would be a fair argument. It's along the lines of what Matt was just saying. Fatigue in the way that she responded to a child is not an acceptable answer. And I would say that's an excuse, and that we should absolutely simultaneously condemn her and say, look, you shouldn't talk like that to a child ever, ever. I don't care if they're black or white. Like if a 5-year-old is stealing from you, if a 10-year-old is stealing from you, they are still 10. They have no clue what they're doing. Like, and this is what conservatives need to. Conservatives are not always consistent. I'm sorry, you're not. And I'm personally conservative. I'm not politically conservative. And sometimes they will go, like in this particular case, they will say, well, um, they'll simultaneously out of their mouth say, hey, this 5-year-old shouldn't be stealing. Maybe he kind of deserved it or whatever. They'll kind of justify the actions on some level because the kid's 5 or whatever. But then they'll turn around and they'll be like, 5-year-olds can't consent, to like sex changes and stuff like that. Okay, well, remember, 5 years old, 10 years old, they can't consent to anything. Okay? And because they can't consent to anything, that also means that their ability to reason and rationally understand the ramifications of stealing also play a role in the fact that they are 5 or 10. So if you want to be consistent, you have to say, okay, well, they can't consent to all these things because they're immature. They're 5 or 10 years old. Doesn't really much matter at those ages. They're 5 or 10 years old, and they can't consent to sex changes. They can't consent to being verbally harassed. They also don't have the capability of rationally making a decision when it comes to stealing. Again, that's not excusing it. You shouldn't steal, whether you're 5 or 50. However, if you're 50 and you're stealing, we should have a lot more heat for you because you've had 50 years to learn to not do that. When you're 5 or 10, number one, you're super duper immature. Okay? Like, I'm telling my wife a story and my son just starts talking and he's like, hey, dad, you know about this? Blah, blah. It's like, adults don't do that. Well, they shouldn't. Some do, right? But we expect different things from adults than we do children. And while I would expect a child to not steal, that's largely a reflection of the parents, not so much the child. Now, there is a certain point, and there's no particular age, but there is a certain point where you can say, you know better. Whether that's what you were taught by your parents or not, you know better. 5 or 10 is not that age. Right? Like it is and it isn't. It is in the sense that like by 10 you should have an understanding, even if your parents didn't teach it to you, that stealing is wrong. You should be able to rationalize and understand that. However, your ability to make good decisions is still immature. So I would expect that if there's anybody that's going to steal and we say, all right, it's time to have a sit down and help Johnny understand, 10 years old would be it. So I agree with Matt on this particular issue. Not I said wholeheartedly in my show notes, maybe not wholeheartedly exactly, but so close that it might as well be. Like I probably agree with him like, I don't know, 97%, something like that. And there's like about 3% in that I don't really agree with. But mostly I do agree. This is the counter to the mob. This is the antidote. This is the check and balance. There's always a check and a balance. And I think that when we look at things and we say, man, that's pretty distasteful. Why is somebody supporting that? This is some of the thinking that should go on in our minds. Like, what is the deal here? How can I break this up? How can I look at this at individual components and then say, in this story, this element is bad. This element is a good thing, and then put it all back together and say, overall, this is a terrible story, or overall, it's a good story, right? Like, and we could go through pick a story, and we can talk about the negative things. We could talk about the positive things. Um, the LA riots, was it 1992? Reginald Denny. If you're an old, you'll remember this story. Reginald Denny, truck driver, white guy, driving through the LA riots. And then there was a helicopter that caught the whole thing on film. He slows down to not hit people. They jump up, they yank him out of his truck, they brutally beat him, threw a brick on his head, right? And a lot of people might go, "Oh man, those savage black people," right? This is a terrible story. That part is terrible. What was the good part of the story? Well, like 4 black guys were watching it on TV independently. They weren't all together. They were just independent. They were watching this and they go, "Oh my God, I got to go help this man." And all 4 of them rushed over from wherever they were and helped this man. I think by the time they got there, he was just laying there. And so they grabbed him and they drove his truck I think they drove his truck to the emergency room and got him help. They probably saved his life. So out of that story, when we're looking at things individually, we say, all right, the men that pulled him out, they were immoral and evil and they should go to hell for what they did. Literally, I'm not joking. They should go to hell. And the 4 men who ran out there to save him, they should go to heaven. Right? They were the good guys in this story. Reginald Denny, as far as I remember, was just trying to drive and take his load to where it needed to go. And he was trying not to harm anybody in the process. So from what I recall, he was also a good guy in the story. So you have 2 elements of good in the story, and then there's one horrible, awful, evil thing. Well, the whole thing is evil because the fact that somebody got harmed by a mob who was out of control, right? And this is my point about mobs. There is no antidote, there is no counter to the mobs that's going to make you feel good. What was the antidote to breaking in to people's stores? Well, it was what we call a rooftop Korean. That was the antidote. Well, that was one of them, right? Was that, hey, you're running around burning down buildings. Guess what? You might go to the wrong building to burn it down and break in because you may not come back home. You may end up in a bag zipped up. That's what might happen to you. That's uncomfortable. I don't want people to die, but at the same point, I don't want you burning down somebody's building and throwing bricks at truck drivers just trying to do their job. I don't want that either. So I have to make some choices and say, what is it what is the response? How do we counter this? And a lot of times that response has to be, I don't want to say more harsh, but it has to be enough that it outweighs what was happening for people to get the message. And so, like Matt says, one way that you can get the message from them to the mob is that, hey, you may go after this person that was legitimately doing a bad thing, but if you go after them to a certain point, if you cross a certain boundary, you now have made that person who was the bad guy into a victim. And if you do that, people may rally to their defense. And so hopefully the mob starts to learn this could happen. Let's dial it back so that we keep this bad person a bad person. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with getting online and saying, look at this terrible woman. I can't believe that she did that. What a terrible person. And then just making her a pariah. But once you start going after her job, her family, her, her, friends, whatever, people that are standing up for her, once you start going after them, that's a different ball game. And that needs a response. And this is what it is. And so I think he's right. I don't necessarily hope that she becomes a millionaire. However, if becoming a millionaire will teach the mob a lesson, well, then in that case, I would. And if that's what it has to be to get the result of a mob that dials back, then fine, make her a millionaire, make her a multimillionaire. I'm not personally donating; it's not my thing, but other people surely can. So teach that mob a lesson because the government can't do it. Nobody's coming to save you. I mean, really, unless it's good citizens, but really think of it as nobody's coming to save you. So, all right, let's go to some comments here. And let's see what you guys are saying up in the chat. The chatty chat. So let's see here. Let's see here. Oh man, you guys a little bit chatty today. Episode 500. Woot woot. Yes, I know it's exciting, right? Like I was like 500 episodes, and here I am. Looking forward to episode 1000. Let's effing go. Yes. You know, I was thinking Tom Woods did a special event for his 2000th, and I think he might have done one for his 1000th. If we grow this channel such that by the time I hit 1000, that it makes financial sense to have some sort of event, I will do one too. And I'll have to go back and look and see what Tom Woods did so I can compete and be like, well, he did this, I'm doing this. I don't know, just kidding. Not really a competition against him, but you know, I do look at people as for motivation. Abolish traffic. Maybe. Are you a cyclist? Just kidding. Let's see what else we got. DL doing his best Michael Winslow impression. Is that from that's from the Steve Urkel show. It's not called the Steve Urkel show. It's from Family Matters. I think it's Family Matters. Is that where I'm trying to remember who Michael Winslow is? Was that the dad? I can't remember, and I don't know what the impression was. Let's see. Rumble hours go burr. Yes, we're going to go to intermission here. We're going to come back. I'm going to give you some thoughts on my motivation and influences, and then we're going to have Rumble Premium. I cannot handle 2 DLs at the same time. Oh yeah. So that's in response to yesterday. I had 2 monitors going with 2 Rumble accounts watching yesterday's episode. Probably shouldn't put that out there. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, looks like some conversation back and forth. Let's see here. Oh, I'm not colorblind, but I really don't care what you look like unless you're a pretty girl. Required misogynistic comment. That's not misogynistic to say that you like pretty women. Lots of people like pretty women, men and women alike. And then lots of people like attractive men, women and men alike. Nothing wrong with saying what you like. DL is not a very good old if he doesn't get the Michael Winslow reference. LOL. Okay, so not a very good old, but we're gonna do this. So Michael Winslow is an American actor, comedian, beatboxer, billed as the man of it. Oh, the Police Academy guy. Oh, so you're talking about where he's like, yes, I remember that dude. Yeah, like so. Now that my memory's been jogged because I am a proper old and things do get lost over time. I'll remember a scene from the movie. One of them, I don't remember which one it was. There was like 5 of them, but in one of them, speaking of mobs, the mob was around the car and he gets on the PA and he does his best machine gun and he's like, and everybody just like scatters because they're like, oh my God, it's gunshots, right? And so then I actually saved them. So yes, Joe, or not Joe, I am a proper old, also down to the point where I might need my memory jogged. So there it is. Okay, you're right. Yeah. So my VA lady, I was wrong. I thought it was the Family Matters with Dad Winslow. That's what I thought too at first. I was like, oh, Winslow. And I was like, but I don't remember his name, me and Michael. So fun times. All right, folks, let's go to intermission and then we'll be back and I'll talk about, some of the things that have motivated me, along the way here.
What's up, Solutionaries?
Hey, Liberty
Mosh
fam,
right here,
will do me
founder
a
of Black
favor.
Guns Matter.
If you enjoy the show, hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious... we're trying this. It's not working. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks, we are having a technical difficulty, but I am trying to play this and we will get this right. How about this?
What's up, Solutionaries? Maj 2 right here, founder of Black Guns Matter and the Solutionary Center. We offer basic firearms classes, conflict resolution, and a whole host of other skill sets that are beneficial to our communities all around America. We're able to do these classes because of your voluntary donations. We don't accept government funds. The people that choose to pay it forward to remove the financial barrier to entry are choosing to do so voluntarily. So you can support at givesendgo.com/solutionary. Give it whatever level you can afford to do. Repost the content. Let folks know that we have a community to save and we have to do it ourselves together. givesendgo.com/solutionary. Be safe, be solutionary.
Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back. And I love this comment here. DL trying to earn his old cred back by not knowing how technology works. You know, I've said this before. You would think that somebody in technology who develops for a living, I write code and I automate things. You think, man, you're pretty stellar at using technology. And I'm pretty not. Especially now that I'm getting older, because I'm getting set in my ways. And I'm like, why do I got to use this? What do I got to, why do I need 14 different cash apps? And then, all the young kids are like, because people use different ones. And I'm like, okay, but I use this one. so, yeah, I'm definitely an old. All right, let's get into this. Let's talk about my motivation. And I'm going to be kind of quick on this. I'm probably going to spend like maybe 15 minutes or so. And then we're going to go to the Rumble Premium and see who shows up. Again, sign up for Rumble Premium by clicking the red button. And then today's Rumble Premium is just going to be like my initiation, getting in there. We'll see if my oldness works it out correctly or not, whatever. So we'll figure that out. We're going to get it all figured out. We're going to keep it light. I'll talk to you about some of my favorite episodes that I've done over the 500. All right. So motivation. Why did I start this podcast? Number one, my wife would tell you that I like to talk, and it gave me a perfect excuse to talk a lot. And she would also tell you that I'm not a big fan of being interrupted. Now I'm not rude about it, but I just kind of interrupt back and continue my story sometimes. And so I have to learn sometimes to dial it down and give other people an opportunity to talk. And that's even happened on this show. There was an episode a while back where I had a guest on and I was doing a little too much talking, and somebody in the comments was like, dude, shut up. Let your guest talk. So yeah, it even happens on the show sometimes. But more importantly, it was 2019, or it was actually 2018, the end of 2018. I was like, man, I think I should do a podcast. And at the time, I was not aware that everybody in the world had a podcast, much less like virtually every libertarian. And so I just didn't occur to me. I didn't even look. I knew there were a couple big names, and I thought I can do this too. So I decided I was going to start a podcast, and I was like, all right, what am I going to call it? What's my goal? What is my purpose? And I wanted to I wanted to show people that we could do politics different. We could have these conversations differently. Doesn't mean we can't be passionate. And sometimes you got to lay it down. You got to call somebody out, maybe even say something a little unpleasant to them, right? Like that's normal part of the human experience. And, but ultimately I was like, I think we could do politics a little different. And for me, liberty is pretty important. So when I approach politics, I approach it with liberty in mind. How can I improve the world and make, expand liberty, and which I believe would make the world a better place? And so I was like, but also I'm about to be a dad. I was like, how can I incorporate that in? And so I came up with the name Liberty Dad to kind of reflect that I really want to talk a lot about liberty. I'm also going to be a dad, but more on the dad side, I realized, because this is again 2018, the year before my son was born, I said, I'm going to be raising this little human. We knew he was a boy. This little guy, my wife and I, but I was talking about me in terms of the show. I'm going to raise this kid and teach him everything that he knows, or that he will learn, at least for a season, right? There'll come a season where he starts learning things from other people, from his friends, his peers, his teachers, from whatever sources that he gets it from. And then one day he's going to go off maybe to college or just go off into the real world. And what kind of relationship do I want with my son then? And I was like, I want my son to always feel comfortable coming to me and saying, like, I'm going to raise him. Don't hurt people. Don't steal their stuff. Will he be a libertarian? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, if he ends up being a person that lives by that, I will be pretty happy. But one day he's going to meet, like, let's say he goes to college. Well, he might come home and say, Dad, I know you talked forever about how communism was bad, but I had this professor who was telling me these things. And I want him to be able to say, what are your thoughts? Not because, Dad, you're so great and wise, and please bestow upon me your knowledge that this, of what this professor said, counter, like, not that. Well, maybe a little, right? But seriously, not that. I want him to always just be curious of what I have to say, like knowing that Dad has a different opinion. What would Dad have to think about this? And maybe he'll agree, maybe he won't. And so I realized in order for him to want to come to me when he's 22 and ask me a question about something, anything, could be what he learned in college, could be something on the job, it could be just a life problem that he's experiencing and he's not sure how to deal with it, like anything. If I want him to come to me tomorrow, then I need to foster the kind of relationship today. And so initially I started out with the tagline, tomorrow's conversation about how we engage today, preparing for tomorrow's conversation about how we engage today. And that I ended up dropping it just because it felt kind of long and I didn't really see other people using taglines like that. Seemed kind of old school. But that's basically the driving factor, is that I want him to uh, always feel comfortable coming and talking to me. So, like, I'll give you a good example as a little kid, and this one's kind of an easy one. Like, this is kind of like a no brainer, and I think any parent would say, "Well, yeah, duh," right? But I think this kind of lays the groundwork for all of it, right? Like, this is how I want all the experiences to go. When he was when he was potty training, when kids potty train, they make mistakes, and I always wanted him to be able to come to me and say, Dad, I had an accident, whether it was, he was running around outside and just didn't pay attention and ended up wetting himself, or he woke up in the middle of the night, which he has, and comes in and is like, Dad, I peed the bed. And I never want him to feel like afraid to come to me and tell me something unless he's like done something very terrible, like really terrible. Like if he's 22 and he's like, Dad, I'm a serial killer, he damn well better be afraid to tell me. Okay. But for most things, like 99% of the experiences that he has, I want him to feel comfortable coming and talking to me about it. And so I have to develop that from the very beginning. And so part of what I try to do is try to engage with people by giving them the most freedom to tell me something without being a psycho about it. And so I try to be objective. And this is where, like, my initials DL stands for Daniel Leroy. Daniel, if you look up that, it means a judge. I'm very judgmental sometimes. But also Leroy is French for Leroy, which is two words, the king. And so I try to embody that and, like, say, like, I'm the most objective libertarian, and I try to look at things objectively. Yes, this woman was saying racist things. However, the response was so disproportionate that now we're in a different area of this story, right? That's the objective. That is being a good judge. That is being kingly, if you would. Now, am I all that way all the time? No. And I knew I wasn't. So I was like, this is going to be something that I want to present to people, but at the same time, grow into myself. And, and I have no problem telling people that, like, hey, that's not who I have always been, but it is who I aspire to be. And along the way, um, along my journey to be a better person, which actually started a long time ago. I'm just saying this Liberty Dad persona was what I created in 2019 or 2018, 2019, with the birth of my son, to say this is the kind of person that I want to be like. And it's impacting every aspect of my life, because now I think about, like, how do I want people to think of me? How do I want this conversation to go in the future? Well, if I want people to respect me tomorrow, I need to be respectable today. And I need them to understand that they can talk to me and I'm not going to be some crazed lunatic. And here's the fun part. Um, since my son was born, he's now 6. I have had friends reach out and ask me my opinion on things. I've had friends here locally who are not libertarian, who are not even conservative personally. They're more liberal or progressive. And they've reached out and they've been like, "Hey DL, you're somebody that's fairly objective. What do you think about what's on the ballot?" Right? Not people, but like, when we have like issues on the ballot. What do you think about this issue? And then I will tell them, and it feels good knowing that I have friends who are of a different political bend coming to me and asking for my opinion. What does that mean? That means that I've presented myself as somebody worthy of that thought in the future, right? Like, I had to build that character of who I was. And some of it's more natural, some of it I have to really work on. But I'm becoming a better person as time goes on because of this. And so that's what the Liberty Dad show is about. The other thing that it's about is about learning. One of the things that I love, I am a terrible student. When I was growing up, my mother would beg them to fail me. And they were like, well, and you might say, well, dude, seriously, your own mother wants them to fail. She was, she was like the white tiger mom. Like, in terms of tiger mom, not as tough as the literal tiger mom, Amy Chua. If you read her book, which I recommend, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, go read that memoir. My mom wasn't quite as crazy as her in that book, but she was tough. And so, like, yes, she asked them to flunk me, but it was because I would not do my homework, and so here's what happened. I would not do my homework or poorly do it for like the first 3 quarters of the year. And then the last quarter I would ace everything, or some, maybe not quite the last quarter, but so toward the end of the year, I would start acing things and then balance it all out enough that I could pass. It wasn't a particular strategy. It was just I was being lazy. And then once I realized this is the moment of truth, I kicked myself into gear and started doing well. And then I benefited. Right. Like, so I'm a terrible student. However, like, in formal terms. However, I love learning. I love reading. I just don't have it within hand, but I just bought a book on the Federalist Papers to review through that just recently. And I've got like a friend that lives down the street. He's a pastor, and he's written a book, and he's going to be he's doing his pastor thing on me. And he's like, "Hey, well, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this book." And I'm like, "All right, cool. When it comes out, let me know. I'll buy it and I'll read it and I'll give you my thoughts." So I love reading. I love learning stuff. Um, and I love, and what I love to learn about is all over the place. So if you look in my library, my personal library, you're going to find books on economics. You're going to find books on social topics, like emotional IQ, social IQ, those kind of things. You're going to find I've got physics books, a couple physics books. I've got mathematics books that dive into mathematics. I've got history books. I've got philosophy books. I've got psychology books, books on libertarianism, books on computer programming. They're all over. You name it, I probably got a book, or I've at least read one that I can tell you about, or maybe more than one, depending on the topic. So I just enjoy reading in just all areas. So I am very autodidactic. I am very self-taught. I will just read stuff and learn it. And so one of the things that I've realized, and I realize it more and more as this show goes on, that um, reading allows me to comment better and more objectively on the topics of the day. And sometimes it's not just on the topic. Like I'll read about something and then 5 years later, I'm talking about a topic and then I'll revert back and I'll go, "Oh yeah, this thing that I read bears relevance." And then I can bring it in and show you how. Right? So to me, this is important. And I'm going to read something to you. I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but I'm going to read it. I mean, where did it go here? So I must have closed it. Hold on, give me a second. Let me open it back up. But this comes from Isaac Asimov, and I've read the whole thing before. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's a certain part of it that I think is extremely valuable, and I can't rave about enough. So it comes from a 1980s article in 1980 he wrote called "A Cult of Ignorance." And so he's criticizing this idea of America's right to know. And it's this idea that like Americans have a right to knowledge. And now in specific terms, like you have no right to knowledge, I would argue. You just have a right to live in the world and pursue things of your interest, provided that it does not interfere with somebody else's right. Um, but in this article, he's criticizing this idea of right to know. And he's like, look, America's not really into reading, and they don't. They kind of eschew this idea of being smart, and to the point where it's like, oh, that's the experts realm, and they're just a bunch of talking heads, rambling on because they're super smart. And to some degree, there is some truth there, right? Like there is a point where intellectuals are basically just doing things for intellectual exercise, and there's no value add necessarily to the world. And that's fine. Like I don't have an issue with that. But there's a lot to be said about learning and intellectualism that can be applied to the world that we live in. So here's what he said toward the end of the article. Um, he says, we might begin by asking ourselves whether ignorance is so wonderful at all and whether it makes sense to denounce elitism. And I think there's a time and a place to denounce elitism. But in a general sense, I think it's a bad thing. And then he goes on and he says, I believe that every human being with a physically normal brain can learn a great deal and can be surprisingly intellectual. I believe that what we badly need is social approval of learning and social rewards for learning. We can all be members of the intellectual elite. And then, and only then, will a phrase like America's right to know and indeed any true concept of democracy have any meaning. I think he's dead on right there, right? So when I look, and you can see it in the thumbnail for this episode, I just put in some of the influences that I've had. Some of them are newer, some of them are older. Isaac Asimov is in there. I put in Austin Peterson because I don't necessarily, I hope he's not watching, but I don't necessarily watch his show all the time because I have to go to work, and his show is right at the time that I go to work. But I do catch it sometimes, and I follow him on social media, and sometimes I agree with this stuff and sometimes I don't, and that's fine. But he's been influential in some ways. But one of the biggest ways that he's been influential was the quote that I put up at the top of the show, at the beginning of the show, where he says, work, 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 get up at 4:30 a.m. every day, stream for 30 or so people every day, keep pushing, keep improving. Then one day, a year later, boom, 50,000 viewers, lesson ears, keep going. Don't quit. Believe in yourself. It takes time. So he's influenced me in the game of podcast by saying basically like, look, it can take a long time. And sometimes it may feel bleak at a certain point. You might be like, really, I'm getting up. Or I don't get up at 4:30. I get up about 5. So I wake up at 5 and maybe I am streaming to only 30 some people. And not to diminish the 30 people, but when you're putting in several hours of work, for every podcast episode, 5 days a week, and you're not making money, sometimes you start looking and you say, should I be doing this? Am I wasting my time? Because what reward am I getting out of it? Am I growing? Am I, all these things? Because nobody wants to do anything. I don't want to say nobody because we want to be careful with absolutes. It's hard to continue to justify actions if you're not continually getting more and more back, right? It's not that the 30 people don't matter. They matter. It is that after a certain point, if you're doing more and you're putting more energy into something, you want more and more in return, right? Like that's how it works on the job. The more you work, the harder you work at your job, the the more increase you want when it comes for a pay raise, right? The more that you want to be able to maybe move in the future to a new job and get a significant bump in pay, right? Like, hey, I worked and I put in all my time here. I accrued a lot of skills and it's time for me to move on. I'm moving now from company A to company B. And in company B, I'm hoping to make, $20,000 more than I was at company A. I'm hoping that all that work I put in will now come back to benefit me positively in this reward, right? That's what people want. And sometimes the time between where you're moving along and the time that you get that compensation can be a huge gap. And so sometimes you do need that motivation. So yeah, people around me motivate me. Other people, Thomas Sowell, I've read so many of his books. Isaac Asimov, Carl Sagan. A lot of these, there's names galore that I could go back. Walter Williams. Who else was on my? Who else did I have on that picture? At least should name all the people on the picture itself. Let's see, Matt Walsh. Like I said, I agree with him about 50% of the time, and kind of like this hidden goal of mine is to be like the libertarian version of Matt Walsh, in a sense. Like he talks about politics and culture, but he does it from a conservative perspective with his conservative views, politically conservative views and personal conservative views. Whereas I want to do it from a libertarian perspective. And so sometimes I'll agree with him, but sometimes not. Sometimes I might agree with him, but for different reasons, whatever. And then like another person that's on this graphic is Antonin Scalia. Like I've read a lot of his stuff, mostly his rulings, and I've been meaning to get around to buying one or two of his books and reading those. But I've listened to some of his speeches, and he has been very influential. And if you want to know, like, why does DL do bill reviews on Monday? A large part of that is because of Antonin Scalia, because he taught me that I, as a regular person, could read the law and have some semblance of understanding. I may not understand it all because I've not been formally trained, and there are some things that maybe I won't know, but as a regular person, I can know this stuff. Thomas Sowell has said, like, you can learn, and about, and Walter Williams has said, like, you can understand a lot about economics, even if you haven't studied economics or went to school for it, right? Like these are some of the things that I get from, these greats. Isaac Asimov, you can learn a lot about science and you can understand it if you will only read, right? Austin Peterson, hey, keep pushing. Success can be yours, but you got to keep pushing. You got to keep doing your best. And sometimes you're going to have to just drag yourself out of bed, right? Like all these people and more have been an inspiration to me. My wife and my child, my son, they are an inspiration to me, right? Knowing that, I'm doing things and hopefully, the money will come in, if you will, later, and then they'll be able to benefit from that. Also, the conversation that I had on with Mark Kay the other day, where he's a fellow podcaster and he was talking about his kids, and how they've grown up. Like those kind of things are motivating to me. Those are influences. Like, yeah, that seems like a great thing to be able to have your kids, maybe recommend your show or say, yeah, dad, that was kind of cringe, dad. Let's dial that back. Right. Those kind of things, like they can partake in that. Knowing that my wife wants me to be as successful as I want her to be in real estate. Right. So these kind of things are motivating. These are some of my influences, just some of them. Again, there's a long list of influences that I have. Some of them are Republican, some of them are Democrat, some of them are conservative, some of them are progressive. The long list of names I can't possibly get to, but that's how Liberty Dad came to be. And then now I look and I say, I want to show the world we can have different conversation, and I'm going to show you just how much you can learn if you would just read. Just spend some time reading. Most of the shows, if you take out all the prep for the show, like getting screenshots, figuring out what angle I want to talk about, figuring out what maybe clips to show you, what video clips, those kind of things. Once you take all of that out, the actual part where I research and study, you can do. You can do all of that, and you should. That is why I put things in the show notes so that you can go look it up and see if I got it right. I want to make sure that whatever I tell you is, number one, correct in the facts. my assessment and my interpretation of the facts you might disagree with, but the facts themselves, I want to get right. And if I get those right, then the chances of me getting my interpretation correct goes up. And I want to teach you, the audience, that. Now, maybe you just don't want it. Maybe you're like, look, I'm happy reading Harlequin romance. I don't know if people read that anymore, but maybe you're like, I'll just read Harlequin romance and then I'll get all my news and information from Liberty Dad. That's cool too. I mean, it's your time. You do what you want with it. But if you want to do something different, if you want to say like, look, I can learn too, I want to be that motivation for you. I want to show you that it can be done. I want to show you that, yeah, no matter who you are, you too can communicate the message of liberty to people. And so I work really hard to come up with new angles and new ways to describe how I view liberty. That's my goal. So my goal is to be that Liberty Dad. In a sense, it's preparing for tomorrow's conversation by how we engage today. And part of that engagement means learning, thinking critically about topics, being objective, communicating in such a way that people want to talk to you or want to seek out your opinion. That's my goal. So let's get into some comments, and then we're going to try and dive into this Rumble Premium and see how that goes. So gets our comment music going, right? Because we always need our comment music. And then let's check out and see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Don't see anything on Facebook, so we're good there. Don't see anything in Twitter. Just reminder for anybody that's watching on Facebook or on Twitter, X, as you probably know it. I cannot get those comments up on the screen at this time. So what we do is we just put up the ones that come through to Rumble, which are going to be from YouTube and Facebook. All right. So let's see. I'm looking here. Yes. At any time, AMA questions. So you can ask me anything if you want. I don't see any. Hopefully I'm not missing them. Let's see. Kagela says, please teach him, and I presume you mean my son, to think for himself. He will always know you love him. I agree. And it's funny. One of the things that we try to do is we give him a lot of latitude to explain himself. You know, we don't just be like, you did this is wrong. We're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's, not necessarily in this angry tone, but sometimes it's more like, okay, what do you got? Why are you doing this? And if he's got a good answer, sometimes we're like, okay, well, we'll let it go, right? We try to find as many opportunities as we can to give him that autonomy. Now, sometimes we got to put our foot down because he is still 6, right? And sometimes he doesn't even know why. So like I told you the story about him saying the F word one day at dinner, and he just casually dropped it. No big deal for him. And I was like, okay. And my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, so I didn't get mad at him. He didn't get in trouble. I just I asked him to repeat. So I made sure that I heard correctly. And I think I used the word. I said this, so he knows what word it is. I was like, this is an adult word. You are not to use it. Right. And he's like, okay, Daddy. And he doesn't use it. And then sometimes I'll put on something, maybe some music in the car, some of the old music that I like to listen to, or maybe some podcast or something, maybe it has some profanities in it. And I just let him know. I've said it before. We had this conversation about bad words. I don't really like the idea of bad words, but I'll say, this is an adult word or this is a bad word. You don't say it. And then sometimes I'll joke with him and I'll say, hey, you little turd. And he'll go, no, I'm not a turd. You're a turd, Dad. And so then I'll say, yeah, we can talk like that to each other, but don't say that to your mommy. Right. So he's learning to think and to recognize time and a place for different things. These are adult words. I'm not to say them. As he gets older, he will figure out when and how he can say them, and we'll deal with it then. But for now, just easier just to say, don't say them. That way he doesn't get in trouble at school or something for that. But then there's other things. It's like, hey, you can say this with Daddy, right? You can joke with Daddy and call him a turd, right? Like it's cool. We'll have a little laugh and hug each other, right? So yes, teaching him to think for his own self by way of giving him as much latitude for doing that as possible. Let's see here. Would Liberty wife consider herself independent or NPA when it comes to politics? I think she would call herself NPA. She doesn't side with any political party that I know. She is personally probably more conservative, and that probably influences her politics more so than anything. So that's where Liberty Wife is. Let's see here. Maybe Liberty Son will take clips of your live streams to shut down the communist teacher when he comes home from college, and he'll be talking about what episode he had to show his teacher. Perhaps that's good. I wouldn't argue with that, although he is 6. So by the time he goes to college, I don't know if I'll still be streaming back, at that point. That'll be like 15 years from now. I might be streaming. You never know. Who knows what's going to happen in 15 years? I might still be streaming, and hopefully, if I am, I'll have better arguments that he can use. And he'd be like, well, on my dad's nationally syndicated show or something. I don't know. My dad's national show that has millions of followers, this is what he said. So maybe that'll happen. Who knows? That'll be up to the audience to see if they catapult me to that point. Or if I'm just still a small show. And maybe he still can say, nope, my dad had a better argument. Or maybe he'll have his own, going back to the comment about, my son thinking for himself. Maybe he won't need any of old dad's show. Like, dad's old school. I got new stuff. I got new ways of talking about this. Maybe that'll be great. Maybe he'll be like, maybe one day he'll say, one of my influences is dad, and he did all right. I'm doing better. Fair enough. Hope so. Let's see what else. Liberty Lady. If you want the Mark K dad episode, that Liberty Lady, my VA lady has posted it in the chat. Go ahead and check that out. I'll also post it in the show notes so you can check it out if you are unable to find it in the chat. All right, folks, I think that's the end of it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to close the show out with my normal way. And then I'm going to click on the Rumble Premium and see how that goes. So let's see how it goes. But for now, let's get that intro, and then I will see you guys either tomorrow or in the Rumble Premium chat. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.